Derailed trip. Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's someone that's no one here, and welcome to today's report. Today's report is from DrugsAddict off Erowid. This happened in 2012. Gender, male. The drugs used was 4-HOMET. Age was 21. The dose was 25 milligrams. Prior experience: he's mainly interested in tryptamines and psilocin derivatives, but has done ecstasy once and smoked a lot of weed. And where this happened: from school, on his way home, and within his neighborhood, and finally his house. So this is our first report on this substance. It is a more obscure one, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to enjoy it. It is a psychedelic. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Myself. I am a fairly experienced user in terms of tryptamines. I have used mushrooms a couple of times and researched chemicals, also psilocybin derivatives, a couple of times as well. I am less so experienced in other, more mainstream drugs. I have taken ecstasy once, smoked pot a lot, though I have quit, and that's pretty much it. I don't smoke, and I am fairly in shape. The trip. There are 2 capsules in the small Ziploc bag. One contains 25 milligrams, and the other 15 milligrams. The first one is the main dose, and the second one is a contingency plan in case things are too mellow. When I take the first capsule, I don't know yet that I won't need the second. As I take the capsule, I am in the washroom of my school. My last course of the day just finished, and I have 8 hours totally free. It's 10:30 a.m. The plan is to take the capsule as class ends. Then I have more or less an hour and a half of transportation to get home. First, the subway. For approximately 45 minutes, I figure it'll be my come-up period. Then the bus for about the same amount of time. I figure I'll listen to music on my MP3 while I watch the landscape change. That's the initial plan anyway. I'm halfway through the second segment of subway I have to take when I start feeling the first effects. I feel my legs are weak, my gravity has been turned up a notch, or my legs just lost their strength. Then a slight nausea starts creeping in and quickly builds up. Nausea is funny that way because once you realize you're feeling nauseous, the best thing to do is to take your mind off of it. But of course, since you're trying to get your mind off of it, the only thing you can think of is the nausea. This time did not differ from that type of experience. I'm trying to think of everything I can do to get the nausea off my mind, reading anything I can in the subway car, scrutinizing people all around, but the nausea persists. Fortunately, I get to my station and I'm still fine. Unfortunately, I've only taken 2 of the 3 lines I need to take to get to the bus station, so I have 1 more metro line to take. As I walk to the loading area, I ponder whether I should wait around for the nausea to pass. The trade-off is it would make for a much more pleasant subway ride, but the downside is the actual effects of the drug will have that much more time to get on. At that point, while I'm waiting for the subway for the last time, I'm having the usual breathing surfaces visuals, and my body is feeling atrociously heavy. I have more and more difficulty to walk straight. In the end, I get on the subway without waiting for the nausea to pass. It's not a conscious decision. I'm more on autopilot at this point, and I feel it would be weird to stop and wait in the subway. When the subway doors close, I feel like a kid on his first roller coaster ride as the ride just starts advancing slowly, not too sure what I just got myself into. The nausea stays with me for the whole ride, but I managed to keep it at bay. Though saying I was feeling relief when we got to our destination would be understating it severely. As I get to the place I need to wait for the bus that will take me home, my movements feel altered and difficult, but I get there without too much trouble. At this point, paranoia starts creeping in. It's not like on marijuana, i.e., you think everyone knows you're high. It's more about the potential consequences of getting caught by someone. Having to deal with all that comes with that. Also, The 4-ACO-MET makes any emotion I feel increase in intensity. So, if you're feeling a little apprehensive, then this apprehension can easily grow out of proportion. This, in effect, I have noted both with psilocin and almost all compounds that are derived from it. As I wait for the bus to come on, I try to avoid looking at people in the eyes. I also try to keep control of my facial expressions, for I tend to forget completely about them when I get absorbed in a particular thought loop. At one point, I look at the gray concrete floor and distinguish a beautiful clear pattern on the ground. It is so well integrated in the concrete that if I didn't know there were no patterns on the floor, I could have believed it to be an actual decoration. When I move my eyes to look elsewhere, the patterns stay grounded in the concrete, adding to the realism. The bus finally arrives. I hop in without too much difficulty and sit down in front of the bus next to a window. The whole ride I am looking out the window at the world outside. By then, the effects are full on. I feel like reality is being shoved into my consciousness. If someone were trying to speak to me, I could scarcely respond, and it is causing me some stress. At times, I get into these thought loops where I completely forget the world around me, only to wake up moments later afraid to have passed my stop. Outside, the world is pure light. The sun shines like it has never shone. I feel like I've never enjoyed the sunlight that way. At the same time, I'm listening to a playlist I prepared for the occasion on my MP3. For those interested, it contains Rat-a-tat, Pink Floyd, Mogwai, Samuel Jackson 5, and Long Distance Calling, among other things. I mention it because I like to know what people listen to while they are tripping, so I feel obliged to mention it. Eventually, the bus gets to my stop. Walking from my seat to the door proves challenging because of the motion. I get off the bus and walk home. As I approach my house, technically my mother's, I notice a black truck parked outside, and I don't recognize the truck from anywhere. So clearly someone's home, even though there isn't supposed to be. At that point, I'm way too influenced to even hold a coherent conversation, and getting back home and confronting whoever is there isn't even an option. I'm not even worried that we might be getting robbed or something similar. I know there's a logical and normal explanation, but at the same time, I don't want to confront whoever it is. So, I turn around and start walking the other way. I remember thinking that there were a lot of people around and it was messing up my ability to think clearly and elaborate a plan. The solution I find is to hop a nearby fence that leads into a nearby forest where no one goes. My thinking is I will be protected from other people's gaze and I will be able to think of a solution. Walking in the woods is amazing. The forest feels sentient and I feel like I'm alone in the world. After walking for a short while, I sit on a nearby rock and start reviewing my options. I could spend the whole afternoon outside, but at the same time, I'm feeling pressured to get to a safe haven, i.e. my home. At this point, it is about 12:15 p.m. It's been about 1 hour and 45 minutes since I took the drug, and I know the effects won't be disappearing for another 3 to 4 hours. The plan I devise is to call a friend of mine to come pick me up and lift me up to my father's house where there's nobody. Fortunately, my friend answers and everything is arranged. I am to get out of the forest and wait for him by the nearby road. Everything goes as planned and my friend comes up to pick me up with his girlfriend, whom I already know. I'm feeling incredible relief when I enter the car, knowing that I am with people with whom I can be completely honest. We chat a bit at first, then my friend tells me that he passed in front of my mother's house and there's no car parked in the driveway. Now, this has, hands down, been the best trip I've had on derivatives of psilocin for the visuals, but I know I haven't hallucinated a black car. In the end, he simply goes to my mother's house and I'm forced to admit there's no car in front of the house. With the danger, at least in my mind, past, there's no reason for me to not go back home, so I thank my friend and go back home. As I walk into the house, I hear someone moving inside. The cleaning lady. I would later learn that the black car was her husband's car, and that for some reason she did not use her own car that particular day. I have no intention of going to converse with the cleaning lady at that particular time, so I retreat to my room and lock the door for good measure. It's about 12:45. I then spend the next 2 hours in my room listening to music on my bed. I listen to some God is an Astronaut, some Godspeed You, Black Emperor, and the soundtrack of the movie of The Fountain. The music is incredibly rich and very emotional. As with shrooms, I feel like I am closer to my emotions on this drug and also more honest with myself. Maybe it is just an impression. After all, I have taken a drug, but I feel I understand my life more than when I am sober. At some point, I am tired of the music and simply spend about an hour thinking about the things that concern me, about people I know from close or far. I think about happiness, about the things I like to do, about how the most normal I feel is on drugs. During this 2-hour period, there is one time I get up from the bed to take a shower, because I just find it to be the greatest idea ever, and boy, was I right. The feeling of being in the shower is amazing. I feel the water running down my body like I have never felt it. I feel like I am a child again, taking his first ever shower, discovering the pleasure of water. I also find myself intrigued by my own nakedness, and look quite a lot at my own body. Eventually, the cleaning lady is done with her work and leaves, enabling myself to take back my home, though at that point, the effects have begun to fade away. I end up spending the rest of the fading trip listening to even more music with nothing really worth noting. Closing notes. A girl to whom I spoke of my drug taking, she herself doesn't really take drugs, once asked me what kind of effects can one expect from such drugs, derivatives of psilocin, or at least close analogs. At the time, I tried to explain, but I feel my explanation didn't lift much of the mystery surrounding those drugs. At a later time, I thought about a comparison which sounds true at least to me. I find that taking these drugs feels like I am being taken back to the time when I was just a little child. I know all that I know today, but things are newer, shinier, more interesting. I discover new things in all that I see, and thus everything is interesting. At the same time, I am innocent because of my young age, so my emotions aren't tampered by social conditioning and traumas. I am more honest with myself because this is the way that a child behaves naturally. I find this comparison to hold for most effects of psilocin analogs, though of course it isn't perfect. I really feel this report, so I particularly enjoy the directions tryptamines pull me, and honestly I can see myself getting into more tryptamines in the future. But first off, what is 4-HOMET exactly? For a lot of people, probably just sounds like another chemical, but if you're familiar with Shulgin's work, you may have heard of this, may have even tried it, but the chemical itself is structured very similar to psilocin, the active compound found in mushrooms. Many compare the trip to mushrooms or other close analogs, but find that it is often more recreational, that the headspace tends to not be so serious, and it's more visually prominent. It also tends to be more stimulating rather than sedating, so it is somewhat in its own area. But looking at DrugsAddict's trip, I think there's a good portion where he went into this worried state, but this I think we can mainly attribute to the setting he was in public while coming up, and then seeing a car you don't know at your house can cause reasonable suspicion and caution while tripping. And the nausea didn't do him any favors either, and I think that actually may be due to the dose he took, as it is on the heavier end. Music though seemed to be one of the best aspects of his trip. Probably had a really nice smooth ride once he got to that point of the trip where he was just chillin'. He also seemed to be mainly filled with positive thoughts throughout the trip. Compared to mushrooms, I might say that this is a gentler, more recreational version of it. But the truth is, we don't know a whole ton about this drug quite yet. The past years have shown some more studies coming out, and this has been briefly touched and considered to be potentially similar to psilocybin in its medicinal potential. The safety profile is expected to be like mushrooms, but again, we don't have enough data to back this all quite up yet. The experience to me, though, does resemble a different flavor of a mushroom trip. There seems to be clear uplifting thoughts towards one's life and how to better it or maintain it. I have to say that I am pretty interested in it and would say that there's a lot of room for exploration. Someday, though, we'll probably find out, but as always for everyone, no matter how experienced you become with tripping, always do your best to manage the proper setting. Because when you're tripping and your settings, just out of tune with what you want, it can be a real pain in the ass just to handle everything.